since 6,572. The tagline, "It ain't no picnic." Pay-per-view buys only 100,000. Where are you at this point in 2000? I know you're not there. Technically, you're getting paid, but where are you?
I'm What time of the year was that? July?
This is July 9th, 2000.
Yeah, I was in Hopetown in the Bahamas, and I was staying there for a long time. I had friends there that had a dive shop, and I went down there. I stayed for about a month.
Pretty cool. What were you doing? Hunting, fishing? What were you doing down there?
Diving. They owned a dive shop, so I would go out with them. We fish, but mostly diving. Beautiful place, Hopetown. Beautiful place.
Were you keeping up
They
to what?
actually had these type. No, no, I wasn't paying any attention to it then. I mean, you know, you wouldn't come in till late from a dive, and you may go out on a dive. Occasionally, I'd catch something, but no, I was enjoying my life.
Yeah, sounds like love and life out there for sure. But when
Yeah.
WCW is at this point, it's Bischoff and Russo. It's their era. They're together. I mean, there's no way that you thought that these two would last together, right?
I thought that if Eric was by himself, absolutely. And there was it ran through my mind that he could have made it, Vinny could have made it on his own, but I didn't think they could mesh those two. Did you?
No, definitely
As
not.
you look back, did you think?
Then I didn't think so. It
Yeah.
was two weird personalities, kind of like the Northern WWF guy, the guy that was successful in WCW. I can't in Bischoff. I can't see them being able to work together. Now looking back, it just seems like insane that Brad Siegel thought it was a good idea.
Yeah, I mean, I don't understand. They're both very good salesmen, so they probably sold it that they both could get along together. But I'm like you. I don't understand how Brad Siegel could thought they could get along.
And it's like the guys are supposedly even, but Brad Siegel told Bischoff he's in charge, and he told Russo he would have to okay things with Bischoff. So it's like they kind of both think they're in charge to a certain extent, but then Bischoff almost has the ultimate power. But then he's not writing the show; he's just given the sign off on it. So it just was destined to fail to me. I mean, do you like that? Let's just say you're working with Dusty or something. All right, Dusty, I'm going to book the show, but then I have to get everything okayed through you at the end. I mean, do you like that idea?
No, not really. It's very hard for both of us to have the same thought process, and that's very hard when the North Tower steps in and tries to play referee. It's very, very difficult.
Did you have any sort of relationship with Brad Siegel?
Not a good one, no.
What
I
what's up
think
with
I
that? What do
saw
you mean?
I saw him for what he was, a guy that thought he knew, like most of them in the North Tower. This isn't that he's a bad guy, but they all thought they knew how easy wrestling was. They didn't think it was hard at all. And I mean, Eric had to really go over there and change their minds a bunch of times. And they were so, I mean, going back to Jim Herd and the Ding Dongs, he wasn't the only one that was coming up with crazy ideas. You know what I'm saying?
Yep. So you
Yeah.
talk to Brad once in a while, or not really?
Well, I would talk to him. They'd have meetings, and I'd have to go to the silly meetings. And yeah, he just thought that this was the easiest thing in the world to do. You get a ring, you put lights in, you get two guys, and they cut an interview, and you draw money, you draw ratings. Very difficult.
Would he pitch ideas and stuff, or no? That's not his thing.
He didn't do it to me. He might have done it to Eric.
What did you think of Russo? Like, did you guys get along? Kind of, I guess he comes in, then you come in, then he comes back. I mean, so what do you think about Russo? And did you guys get along?
Business, I mean, personally, I got along with them. Business wise, we came from two different schools. Doesn't mean he was right, doesn't mean he was wrong. Same for me, doesn't mean I was right or wrong. We just came from two different thought processes. And he had some very good ideas, I thought. There was some that weren't the same mentality that what that company was built on. Did I explain that right? What I'm saying is the company was built on big guys, big heat, big violence, with guys that look like wrestlers. Did I explain it better that time?
Yeah, where the big boys play. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And he he did a good job, I guess. I mean, I wasn't there when he came in. I was there when he came in, but I wasn't there after a while. So I guess I've heard people loved him and people hated him, and that's how it usually goes. But I mean, I also told you about people would butcher Dusty for being a world champion. I never hear anybody knock Vinny for being the world champion. Do you?
Not as much as they should, because that is the worst title win in my mind ever. Because Arquette, at least you're trying to go for, and obviously Arquette's not booking it either. At least you're trying to go for like front cover, shock value. He's got a Hollywood name. His wife is super famous. She's on Friends, all this other stuff. I can kind of see that. But Russo, there's no good reasoning behind it. And even Dusty, the guy's most over guy in the company. Yeah, he's booking it, but he's the most over guy, so he could win it.
Yeah, and at that period of time with Dusty, Dusty was the second most over guy in the wrestling business. Hogan, then Dusty. So I mean, and you got to pass on that. That's pretty cool.
How come you never booked yourself to be world champion as far as WCW?
I wasn't that caliber to be world champion. I mean, the guys that are world champion, first of all, in my mind, back then at least, should be a gimmick, and I was a gimmick, and there should be a distinct level of reality to being a world champion. I mean, I think that's why Goldberg got over so well. He looked the part, he acted the part. Uh, on the other side, Steve Austin saved their asses. Same reason. I think it has to be somebody, and I don't mean you got to go back into the way, way back in the past and try to have black tights and black boots and Luther's wrestling clinic. But it's like when Cena was champion, he had the aura of being a class athlete and a world class wrestler. Did you see that in him, John?
Yes, for sure.
Yeah. Yeah.
So when you look at this show, there's so much controversy surrounding it because, and I know maybe people didn't realize at the time, but if you're paying attention to the sheets and you're paying attention to certain wrestlers, you know Hogan wants to be world champion. Russo doesn't want Hogan to be world champion. Supposedly behind the scenes, they're having money problems where they're losing all this amount of money. Do they really want Hogan on the shows? He's so expensive. I don't know about all that because I don't know how the contracts work and I don't know how much time Hogan's supposed to be on TV and on pay-per-view and stuff. But the whole thing is Russo and Bischoff are going to concoct what they think is something to work the marks and to work the sheets and have like this thing where Hogan's going to end up winning the title and walking out, and then eventually they're going to bring him back, and Hogan's as champion is going to face whoever Russo's champion is. There's so much like intrigue and story. Bischoff has one story, Hogan has another story, Russo has his own story. Were you paying attention to any of this that was going on with like basically Russo not wanting Hogan to be champion?
No, not at all. Not at all. I was, like I said, I was in the Bahamas for that month of July, and I was flying in and out, and I was also going to Spain and Europe quite a bit at that time. That was a year I really traveled and dove all over the world. Yeah.
Did JJ call you and say like, "Oh man, what a clusterfuck we got going on over here"?
Yeah, he would call me and he'd say, "Hey, will you watch it and tell me what you think?" And that week, if I was in the States, I would. Yeah.
So we'll just get into it now as far as that match, and we'll run through the card too, of course. But so Hogan has his title match against Chef Jarrett. As a fan, you know, like timing wise on the show, like this can't be the main event. There's a one match left besides this one, and which eventually is going to turn into two matches. But then it's like, okay, timing wise, what's going on here with the end of this show? So you know something is up. So Bischoff done on TV, but Hogan comes out. Jeff Jarrett comes out. Jarrett, who's the world champion, just lays down, and Hogan puts his foot on him and pins him 1, 2, 3. And Russo comes out. Hogan gets on the mic. He said, "This is why this place is in the shitter." Stuff like this. Supposedly, there's some sort of work shoot element to it going on here, where this was trying to like work everybody. So Hogan and Russo were on the same page. After that, Russo comes out. Hogan and Bischoff leave the building with the title, and they actually have a new title, which is the same big gold belt, just a different version of it that they'll use later on for the main event. But the whole thing was Russo comes out, cuts a promo, rips Hogan to shreds, saying that he's out of here. Just totally ripping Hogan apart, saying that the guys in the back don't want Hogan anymore, and he wanted to be champion and creative control and all this other stuff. Does that sound like something that should be a wrestling angle on TV, that they're playing off real life stuff, and then Russo kind of went into business for himself, so to speak?
To me, when I did it with Pillman, it was that he was crazy and we had a personal vendetta. And we're going to pay it off by getting him over. This is like a personal vendetta that isn't going to help the wrestling business, but you're trying to get yourself noticed by the wrestling universe. Does that make sense?
Yep.
Yeah, there's no payoff. It's like AEW with MJF and Tony. Well, if they did this angle and was going to wrestle, the guy that was leading the charge was Punk. You know, if it's a work or a shoot, it doesn't matter because when he does come back, there's no payoff. He's not going to wrestle Tony, I don't believe. Do
No,
you?
no, definitely not.
So I think this is what they did there. They built a main event angle and exposed that it really wasn't any different than any other wrestling match and diluted the company as much as they possibly can by doing that. And the young guys versus the old guys, Viagra in a pole match. I know some of the stuff. I mean,
Yeah.
it was it was a shock.
Shock TV.
Yeah, yeah.
Crash TV is what he refers to it as. But yes. So there's a dispute. Hogan wants to be champ. Russo doesn't want him to be champ. Russo's the booker. Bischoff has final say, so he's going to agree with the Hulkster, obviously his buddy. But the whole thing was Hogan has creative control. Like, so I guess Russo, this was his way of how can we get the title on somebody else because he doesn't want Hogan as his champion, but Hogan has the final say on what's going on, so he wants to be champion. Is that I don't know? Is that just I don't know. It's one of the things where it's tough to work around that, right? Being if you're creative, you don't want a guy to be champ, and he has creative control. And he says, "Well, I want to win. I want to be champ."
I think this whole deal was a complete farce and a work with them. Let's go back to what I've told you before, JP. Hogan has a personal service contract with Ted Turner. He isn't under a WCW contract. He's not even under uh, Turner wrestling contract. He's on a personal service contract to Ted Turner. How can you go around that when he has complete control, utter control? Are you just bullshitting everybody, or are you just trying to think that you can ramrod your ideas through because you think and they probably would have helped if you thought you could get it through and you knew the guy wasn't going to let you. You know, it's like sticking your finger in the dike when it's the water's leaking, don't you think?
Yeah. Yep.
I mean, that's why I think it was a work all the way. If you know the guy's got complete control, and it doesn't matter how bad the ratings have gone, if they still allow
Can you hear me? Kevin, we were saying
yeah,
about Russo and Hogan. How was a bit of a work shoot going on?
yeah, I think they Russo worked himself into a shoot. You know what I mean? Because he realized he was stuck because Hogan has the power. What do you think?
They both have said it was supposed to be a work shoot to the point where Hogan leaves with the title, but he's still technically champion. Then they're going to crown a new champion at the end of the night. And then a few months later, they're going to build up and have basically Bischoff's champion, which is Hogan, against Russo's champion, who was either going to be Booker T or maybe Goldberg. So that was the plan. But then Hogan and Bischoff leave the building, and Russo gets on the mic and cuts a scathing promo calling Hogan a piece of shit. revealing that he had creative control and that revealing he didn't want him to be world champion, and that later on the night it was going to be Booker T versus Jeff Jarrett for the title, for the vacant title, and whoever won is going to be his real world champion.
Do you think that when Russo was calling Hogan a piece of shit, he was working?
That's the contention, because Hulk ends up suing them, and that's the contention. They never agreed on that. It seemed like he was shooting a bit. He says he's working, but it just seemed like it got out of control. It seemed like he was shooting because Hogan was tough to deal with, or I guess, to him.
Hogan was tough to deal with, I guess. To him. Yeah. I think that he worked himself into a shoot. And look at how look at how far we're fallen from everything runs so smoothly to everything being so crazy and crazy ideas. Basically exposing the business over the world championship, right?
Yeah, definitely.
Strange to me.
It's just one of those shows that kind of lives in infamy. I know it only did 100K buys, but so many people talk about it, and they're still doing shows about it today, talking about the controversy between Hogan and Russo and how it all kind of went sideways. And sometimes the controversy, like Bischoff says, controversy creates cash. It's a good thing. This time, not so much. I mean, it didn't do any business. It didn't help them at all.
Yeah, and I understand that Eric's line, and he's completely right most of the time. But like you said, this didn't help them at all.
This will be Hogan's last show too. I mean, he doesn't end up coming back, which is crazy, right? I mean, this is Hulk's last show. He doesn't end up coming back after this.
Wow, that is crazy. That is crazy.
Now, Russo contends that Brad Siegel told him, let Hogan sit out at home. He's too expensive. We can't afford him. I don't know if that's true because, like you said, with the personal services and because of the way the contracts works, I don't know. But it looked like Hogan didn't want to come back because of the way he was treated at that show. And he ended up suing WCW. So it was one of the things where I think Hogan almost didn't want to come back.
Yeah, I think you may be right. And maybe he thought he was going to go to New York. Do you know what I mean?
Yep.
Do you think that was possibly in his mind back then?
No doubt about it. I feel like that's always where maybe he wanted to go back to.
Yeah, I do too. That was home.
And obviously, there was a ton of money in him because when he came back in 2002, only 2 years after this, basically, I mean, he was the most over guy. I mean, the amount of money and merch, and whether it be the NWO or Hulkamania when it came back, I mean, he made a ton of money in that year for the company. He was kind of, he was the guy, even though he was, well into his 40s at this point. I mean, he was the guy when he came back in 02.
Yeah, I mean, and they had taken that heat from WCW over there, and right away they didn't have to build a storyline because the guys were pissed at the NWO.
Absolutely, yeah. And if you look at it, it's like, okay, the way Russo handled it, probably not great. How would you have handled it? How would you have booked it if this was the case and Hogan didn't want to lose, and let's say you didn't want him to be the world champion? How do you book it?
Well, I don't think you put yourself in that position. If he's got control from the guy that owns the world, meaning the media world at the time, you can't put yourself in this position. Or you need to put your personal thoughts aside and understand you have no control of this. You got to do what he wants to do.
So here we'll go over the rest of the card because it's just one of the things that's just like the major thing. I think that's what everybody remembers from this card. Unfortunately, of Hogan walking out. You know what I mean? I think that's like the only thing people do remember from the show, to be honest. So the show starts out with Lieutenant Loco versus Juventud Guerrero for the Cruiserweight Championship match. Pretty good match, goes 12 minutes. Juventud loses, and Lieutenant Loco, aka Chavo Guerrero, gets the win. So good to start it off with a cruiserweight match, good match. But what do you think about Chavo Guerrero as Lieutenant Loco, which is a kind of a silly Russo gimmick?
Yeah, Chavo is such a great performer, such a great performer that he can make anything work. But do you put a mask on a guy that everybody in the world knows who it is? It's okay if you're working an angle, but the Guerrero name means something, then and now and forever. I don't. Go ahead.
I was gonna say there's a lot of like other things like okay he's Chavo, but it's really like they make him the Misfits in action with Lieutenant Loco, so he's out there with General Rection, which we've talked about before, Major Guns, Juventude's out there with the Filthy Animals, Tigress, Ray Jr., Disco, and Conan, and this is for all surrounding for the cruiserweight title. But it seems like a lot of Gaga surrounding the title and around Chavo not being Chavo, he's Lieutenant Loco.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know where they're going with this. It was it goes back to was they trying to do a sitcom? Do you think?
Very jokey sports entertainment like characters here that they're creating.
Yeah, I mean, huge erection.
Major Guns, which was the Tylene Buck playing the character of Major Guns. She actually flashes her like bikini top too at one point during the match. You know, really like sexualizing it, which is fine or whatever. But it's just funny like that kind of leads to Chavo getting the win. They're using her quote unquote her major guns to help him get the win. So very very Russo-rific sports entertainment esque stuff going on.
Yeah, I can see. I can see Chavo trying to play the role as best as he could. He's a true professional. I mean, but
The
people have different tastes. I'm not into that so much.
So then Big Vito is up next versus Norman Smiley and Ralphus in a hardcore match for the WWE Hardcore title. Big Vito ends up winning this one in 6 minutes. Just simple comedy stuff. Do you like the fact that they make it, have Ralphus out there wrestling?
No, I don't like that idea. I think it just belittles the show. If you did it once in a while, yeah, I could understand it, but not in the situation he's backed into it or forced into it. Not just going out there and wrestling. What's your take on that?
That's a bit much. I don't mind him, and I loved him with Jericho. I thought it was funny, but obviously he wasn't wrestling. He's just out there being a little bit of a comedy spot, or maybe distracting in the match. But to have him actually kind of in the match here with Norman Smiley, I don't know, a little too cartoony for me, a little too sports entertainment. I know it's a hardcore match, and Norman Smiley is already doing a lot of funny stuff anyway with the hardcore stuff. I don't know, a little too over the top for me on that.
Okay, I understand, and you kind of follow my thinking too, old school, keep it as straight as possible. Not saying that there can't be some gaga in there. You have to have some, but don't overdo it. Basically, that's what you're saying, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
So not a great start. I mean, the cruiserweight match was good, but the hardcore match a little bit too much comedy here. Now we're going to go into a wedding gown match. Daphne with Crowbar defeats Miss Hancock, who is obviously Stacy Keibler, with David Flair in this one. That match goes about 4 minutes and 14 seconds. Um, Not great here. The funny thing is, it's a wedding gown match, so if you strip, you lose. Stacy Keibler starts stripping, which enables her to lose. so she quote unquote forgot the stipulation to the match that you got to keep your pants on. There's a wedding cake out at ringside, so of course Crowbar, Hancock, Flair, and Daphne all get into a cake fight. This was not good. This was pretty much I don't know, straight trash, I guess you could say.
Yeah, I mean, you go from Goldberg and Nash discount to finish. You go from Hogan and Sting, Hogan and Flair, to a wedding cake match. Just doesn't make sense to me.
Do you like wedding gown matches with the females? Do you
No,
like the cake involved? Do you like all that nonsense?
yeah, if it's a Jimmy Cornette production, Jimmy knows how to do that stuff. But when you start to take a guy like Crowbar, who was starting to get over, and Vito too, they were starting to get over as being solid. I think that puts them back a few steps that you have to correct it, or maybe you pushed it too far back. I don't know.
So the next match we have Chronic. Brian Adams and Brian Clark defeat the Perfect Event of Sean Stasiak and Chuck Palumbo for the WCW Tag Team titles. Match goes about 13 minutes, 30 seconds. Chronic are your new tag team champs. Not a bad match here. What did you think about Adams and Clark and putting them
Oh, I
together?
like
Two
them.
big
I
boys.
like them. I like them a lot. Love them. Like them a lot. Uh, I had been there when they first got together. Now I would have loved to see them get a push and something done. I don't remember what their demise was. Do you?
They were there until the dying days of WCW. So they ended up eventually going to the WWF, and they had a really bad match against Undertaker and Kane, and that was pretty much the end of them. But they did go to Japan for a bit and were pretty successful.
Oh, good. Good. I like both of them. They were very nice.
Undertaker and Kane got to take their lumps on that one too. I mean, that match just absolutely stunk all the way around when they had that. But this one wasn't bad though. The Perfect Event, obviously Stasiak and Palumbo. Did you like those guys? They seemed like they had a ton of potential at this point.
Oh, I thought they had potential all the way around. Again, I'm not. I wasn't there to really watch what was going on. So, yeah, potential. Yeah, they had all the potential in the world. I thought they looked great. I mean, yeah,
So
one
then
was
the
the
next,
son of a former world champion,
oh
right?
yeah, absolutely, yeah,
Yeah,
Sean, yep. Stan the
yeah,
man.
yeah.
So the next matchup, Chris Kanyon defeated Booker T in about 10 minutes. Very good match here between those two. Jeff Jarrett came out and cheated to help Kanyon get the win. Did you always see something in Kanyon? It seemed like you were, a fan of his and was on his side.
Yeah, I saw something in him, and I saw when it was him, Page, and Bammer, right? The
Yep,
Trident.
Triad. Yep.
Yeah, Trident, brother. I thought that was a very good faction. I think they could have got a lot more out of it than they did. I'm not sure again what happened there, but yeah, he worked very hard, Chris.
So it's interesting to note here. Booker T loses here, and like we mentioned, he'll be wrestling Jeff Jarrett later. And I know you're not a big fan of that because we've talked about this before because they've done this before with the booking. Do you like how a guy will lose earlier on to somebody else and then in the main event end up either winning the title or winning the match? I mean, basically he goes 1-1 for the show.
No, I don't like it. Isn't that what we call what do they call that today's world? 50-50
50-50?
booking? Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, I mean, I don't really see it. I think it's a bad move. I think I don't. I mean, maybe I can be convinced otherwise, but I just don't see it.
booking wise, why do that? Do you think that makes any sense? Like if you're really trying to build somebody up and they're going to be the eventual world champion, does that make any sense?
Not to me. Does it to you?
No, because it seems like, oh wow, the guy already lost. He's not that great of a champion. You know what I mean? It just
Right.
didn't seem like
Right.
a big buildup.
I think the exact same thing. Nobody got to build. I mean, like you said, if you're going to win, you got to win. You know, so
I mean, obviously you're booking, or he was booking the show, so you knows Booker T's coming back out later on, and he's going to win the world title. So it's like, wow, he's going to lose to Canyon before that, who's not necessarily a main event player either.
right. And I know they're going to say, well, we had Jeff come out, and Jeff and him are going to wrestle for it later. No, that's not the way to do it. You want your baby face standing tall.
Then we have Mike Awesome defeating Scott Steiner with the beautiful Madeja by disqualification. This was for the United States Championship, so Scotty Steiner will retain. Match goes about 9 minutes. It's actually a pretty good one. I like Mike Awesome. Obviously, love Scotty Steiner, but actually a pretty good match here between Steiner and Mike Awesome.
Yeah, I was in Japan with Mike Awesome. That's when I met him. He's very nice. He had all kinds of potential. I'm glad that they had a good match. He was a very good performer.
Only thing I don't like about it, Ernest Miller comes out, and that's where the kind of schmoz and the DQ happens, and that's why Mike Awesome gets the win. It's like, okay, they had a good match, but how could they kind of, I don't know, screw it up? They do screw it up because they have Ernest the Cat Miller come out at the end and kind of cause the DQ, but it kind of ruins the match. To me, it would have been better just do a straight finish. I think the match could have been even better.
Well, how many interference have we had so far?
Almost every match, to be honest, has had some. Almost every match.
So,
Overkill. A little overkill.
So that means officials don't mean anything.
True. Yeah.
Well, if we saw that on football, will we stop turning in?
Yeah. True. They got to have some sort of respect for the officials, and not every match needs an interference.
Well, you don't need an official out there if that's what you're going to do.
True.
Yeah.
Yep. So the next matchup is kind of one of the first really cinematic matches that I can remember. It's a graveyard match. The graveyard looked kind of like a really bad horror movie. It was kind of cheesy. Not great, but it's Vampiro defeating the Kiss Demon in about 8 minutes. Not a good match here. Just, I know you didn't see it, but just the thought, think about it. It's like a cheesy set of a show, but it's a fake graveyard, and these guys are going to have like a, okay match. Not really a great match in it, but just the ambiance kind of kills it to me.
Grand Nine from Outer Space, right? Yeah.
Yep.
Did you ever see that, John?
Yep. Oh yeah. Yeah. Horrible. Yep.
Worst movie ever made. Yeah. I would really like to have known the background, what was going on with Dale Torborg at the time. I thought he was a very, very up and coming guy, and they were they getting paid from Kiss to was WCW getting paid from Kiss to push Dale around, to give him a push?
I don't know for sure. I've heard that claim by a few people, but I don't know if that's actually true or not. I hope so, to be able to do that crappy gimmick, but I don't know.
Yeah, yeah, he's a great athlete, and his wife, Asia rather, was great.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah.
She's out there. She was interfering a bit in that match as well, but Vampiro gets the win, and not a good one for that one. Then up next, we have Shane Douglas, the franchise, defeating Buff Bagwell in about 8 minutes here. Decent match. It was okay, but of course, Tori Wilson interferes and helps Shane win. Just another kind of interference, but to me, decent match. Shane and Buff maybe could have had a better performance from both of them.
I would think they would have had a great match. But when you're repeating the same finish over and over again, who knows? You know?
Yep. So then we have the WWE World Heavyweight Championship match that we alluded to and we talked about a bunch earlier. Hollywood Hulk Hogan defeats Jeff Jarrett in about a minute and 19 seconds, but really Jarrett just laid down. Hogan put his foot on him. He pins him. They give Hogan the belt. Jarrett doesn't even look at Hogan. He rolls out of the ring, walks away. Hogan says to Russo, shit like this is why the company is in as bad a shape as it is. And he's the new champion, and just he leaves the building and he's gone. So Russo basically supposedly convinces Hogan to get the cheap victory and that he'll be back at some point. Then Hogan would end up suing Russo for defamation of character after his promo was insult laden and ripping apart the immortal Hulk Hogan.
What happened with that lawsuit? You
Now
know?
now the contention that I've always heard is that Hogan won. And Bischoff has said Hogan won. So Russo has said that he didn't win the lawsuit, but according to Hogan and Bischoff, he did. So I don't know. I'm going to have to do some research on that to see who's right and who's wrong. But Hogan never came back, and supposedly Hogan got money from WCW for it. So to me, it seemed like Hogan won the defamation of character.
Well, I mean, that's public record. You know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah.
That should be easy to find that out.
He did
But
get some money, so I don't know if that's a win or if a settle. So it was, I guess, some sort of settlement because he did end up getting some money for it.
and if this was a work and they decided to go all the way with it, pretty silly that you have a guy calling his champion a piece of shit and the company ends up paying for it and it was a work. Whose thought process was this?
Right. Now they're saying Hogan was going
But
to leave
not
for a
knowing
few
all the
months and come
situation.
back. So saying he was going to come back a few months
Ah,
later with his Hollywood Hogan World Heavyweight title, and it's either going to be maybe him versus Jeff or him versus Goldberg, him versus Booker T. But like you said, he wasn't supposed to call him a piece of shit and say creative control, and that was the Hogan Memorial title, and the real title is on the line later. That was never agreed upon.
okay. But to me, that seems like a real diluted way to get there, huh?
Yep.
Wow. Wow.
Yeah. Not really a big fan of that one. It big swing and a big miss all the way around on that one.
Yeah, I think you're right.
Then we have Goldberg versus Kevin Nash in a singles match. Here's the weird part. It's Scott Hall's contract is on the line in this match. The funny thing is Hall's already gone from WCW at this point, so I don't know why they're kind of teasing it, but I remember as a fan thinking like, "Oh wow, they're going to bring Scott Hall back." No, Scott Steiner comes out for some reason and cheats. Goldberg's a heel at this point, which is even dumber. This is even really really bad, but Goldberg ends up defeating Nash, so the contract with Scott Hall is then terminated. The match goes 5 minutes and 30 seconds. Goldberg like rips up Hall's contract afterwards, and um, Steiner and Goldberg end up beating up Nash too. So, I mean, this was weird all the way around, and I wonder what Scott Hall was thinking. Like they're pretending I'm coming back. Like why? Like I surprised Nash agreed to be in the match. To be honest.
Wow. That's a. Well, they must, I'm assuming, that Vince had a mastermind planned. And I don't want to just bash somebody not knowing the facts, but they really got themselves in a few corners here. And it's very hard when you get yourself into corners like this. It seems that every turn you do, things don't work out, especially the Hogan thing. You end up going getting sued. And, at that time, JP, as I told you, I was diving and stuff. Were people making fun of that they were actually suing one another, Jarrett and Hogan?
Oh yeah, it made WCW look like bumbling fools. Like, wait, how the heck is it a work shoot if Hogan is legitimately really suing them? So it didn't look good on the company at all. It looked like looked like a bunch of fools.
Yeah, yeah, I could see that.
Do you like having fake contract matches for guys that aren't even in the company anymore and
No,
pretending that the
no,
guy's going to come back? Like, I mean, they were really teasing that Hall could come back.
no. I mean, here's the only thing I can think of. Maybe they were trying to get Hall to come back. Maybe they had talks. Maybe Hall had said, "Yeah, I'll come back if you give me this, this, and this." Who knows? But it seems to me they're in a downward spiral right here, and it's very difficult to. I mean, going back to what we said, the referees, the interference, things that made no sense, fighting for a guy's contract that isn't even in the company, doing a work shoot and getting involved in the work shoot itself. I mean, this was very difficult on them.
To me, it's really like a bait and switch. It's like, oh, Hall could come back, and they know full well he's not coming back. Like, so that's a little bit of a tease there. Then they're trying to build up Goldberg as this heel, and that doesn't really work. And Scott Steiner was kind of a babyface earlier against Mike Awesome, and now he comes and he's a heel and he beats up Nash. But why does Steiner care what happens to Hall and Hall's contract? So weird all the way around. Like, why would Goldberg and Steiner be teaming up together? It doesn't make sense on any level.
Well, I can't make a decision on this. I'm going with yours. I seem to lean to your way because I had no idea what was going on at that time. But if you tell me that's where you lay, you've laid the program out to me right now, then I have to completely agree with you.
And Goldberg as a heel too. So I mean that
Yeah,
weird. I know he had heat with Hall, so that part kind of makes sense where he'd want to destroy it. But he's the babyface WCW for a few years. He's the face WCW. Now he's a heel for shock value, and it's not really working.
yeah, yeah. I don't see it.
Very strange
So
stuff. They actually too on a Nitro randomly him as a heel. They had him lose to Booker T almost straight up. They had him lose to Booker T. So it was like they didn't really know what they were doing with Goldberg. Like they just have him lose a weird quickie match to Booker T on a Nitro without any sort of like build up and not on a pay per view. Really, he was not well booked and I don't maybe not well liked by Russo. I'm not even sure.
that's what it seems like that he wasn't liked. So,
So Scott Hudson says like Goldberg versus Nash was originally supposed to be the main event, which I guess kind of covers up for the fact that Hogan and Jarrett was where it was on the card, but it was announced that Booker T versus Jeff Jarrett for the quote unquote real WCW World Heavyweight title would be the main event. And Booker T ends up winning the title in a pretty damn good match in about 13 minutes and 40 seconds. So Booker T is your new WCW World Heavyweight Champion after that whole mess with Russo and Hogan and Jarrett. Booker T comes out as the champion. What do you think about Booker T as the World Heavyweight Champion?
oh, I love Booker as a champion, but this has just brought your world title down to nothing. He lost earlier in the night. Hogan and the powers that be are arguing. I don't think it did any great thing for the company.
I think he deserves it. He's a great champion, but like I mentioned, losing earlier in the night to Canyon, that kind of killed it for me a bit.
Yeah, that's what I just said too. And how many title matches do they have on the card? 3.
Yeah, two
Correct.
world heavyweight title matches: the Hogan match against Jarrett and the Jarrett match against Booker T. So technically two.
2. Yeah. Okay. So I mean, so 3 got different. I don't know. I just can't follow it. Very difficult.
So Booker T's the champ. I totally think he deserves it. He's great. Just didn't like the booking of it. The match against Jarrett is great. It's a good match, but also this is Hogan's last show, so Hogan doesn't come back either. Very strange. You know what I mean? Like just looking back, like what a strange turn of events for this show, and it kind of lives in infamy.
Yeah, sure does. I have no idea what they're trying to do.
Just looking at it, like you would probably dislike the show. You give it a thumbs down.
Oh yeah, how can you get a thumbs up?
Really, nothing great. I mean, there was a couple good matches that I enjoyed, and obviously Booker T had two good matches, one against Kanyon, one against Jarrett. But just the booking of it's weird. There's a lot of interferences. The Scott Hall contract match with Goldberg and Nash doesn't make sense. The Hogan Russo work shoot angle, which everybody remembers from the show, kind of the only thing they remember from the show, even more so than Booker T winning the world title. They remember the Hogan Russo stuff. That was a flop. That didn't work out. Hogan sued defamation of character. I mean, what a mess. You can't kind of get any more quote unquote WCW than this.
Uh, I just don't see how you can possibly say, JP. Well, they had a couple of good matches when you just destroyed the world title.
They did. Yeah, that's true. I guess if you think about it, I mean, you could have good matches, but that doesn't get you anything. You know what I mean? That and 50
Look at,
cents to get a
look
cup
at
of coffee.
would Tyson have fought twice on a card and got beat the first time?
No.
Talk about Booker T. You can't just rearrange the universe.
If you're booking that, right, you'd want Booker T to look strong heading into the main event. Like he didn't even look like he should have been number one contender because he lost earlier than I know Jarrett cheated, but it just to me didn't even seem like he should have been in the match.
If you lose, you certainly don't get a title shot.
And the way Russo explained it during his promo was like the guys in the back that never got a shot that deserve a shot, guys like Booker T, are going to end up getting the shots, and he puts over the Misfits in action, a couple other guys. But it was just thinking like, well, you're giving the guy a title shot. You had him lose earlier in the night for no reason.
Yeah. Yep, I agree with you 100% there.
After this all happened, did JJ give you a call afterwards and say, "Hey, Kevin, we probably need you back here"? Like, did any of that happen?
What's that? I didn't hear.
Did JJ give you a call after the show and say, "Hey, we might need you back here"? Like this show, this place is a mess.
Oh,
Yeah, please.
no, he just said to me, he couldn't believe what was going on. You know what I mean? He couldn't believe what was going on. And JJ is a wonderful human being. He wasn't knocking it. He's saying, I hope it turns out well. But by this time, we had done so, it wasn't just Russo, we had done so many bad mistakes. And we were in a panic mode, and you can't get into panic mode. And it became just sloppy.
All right. So let's wrap it up this week. Let's head towards the plugs.
Yep.
WSW Bash of the Beach, not a good show here in 2000. You can follow me on Twitter and Instagram at 2Man Power Trip. Check out the website, tmptempire.com. You can follow Kevin on Instagram at Taskmaster Talks. Go to Kevin's Pro Wrestling Tees store, prowrestlingtees.com, and visit the Kevin Sullivan store. Kevin, what else you got going on?
Well, I like to plug Ring Squared Old School, the book. You can get it on Amazon. It's The Sopranos Meets Wrestling. But I'll be back with you as soon as possible, JP.
Nice. Great stuff, as always, Kevin. Thank you, everybody, for listening. We'll see you right back here next week for a little Taskmaster Talks with Kevin Sullivan. We'll see you next week.